Welcome to Alles auf den Tisch. My name is Angie Reed, and today we are talking to Nick Hudson from Panda.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
I'm fine, Nick. Can you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Yes, sure. I'm Nick Hudson, and I run an organization called Panda, which is short for Pandemics Data and Analytics. It was set up initially informally in South Africa in the first quarter of last year, when a group of friends became concerned about what we observed, which was a massive gap between the rhetoric in the media, the propaganda about COVID, and the reality of the emerging facts and data from the early stages of the epidemic. And we all shared a certain amount of anxiety about that gap because we saw in it the potential to destroy a lot.
Yeah.
And then as the first lockdown started rolling around the world, we became very worried, in particular concerned that they would be rolled out in developing countries, which don't have the kind of social welfare networks that rich countries have to sustain themselves through these kinds of things. And when our lockdown was called, we swung into action and found other like-minded individuals, formed the organization, and we wrote a paper which asked one simple question: are we sure we've thought through the costs and the benefits? Because according to our calculations, the public health consequences of the lockdown will be far greater than the benefits.
Yeah. And that's actually being proven day by day, more and more. And on your team,
exactly.
Yeah, on your team, so you have lawyers and experts from various fields.
Well, yes, now the organization has grown to an international level. We're represented in many, many countries. The last count was 30, but it'll be north of that now. There are hundreds of members. The majority are doctors and scientists from various fields: immunology, epidemiology, even some more tangentially related ones like ecology and so on. And then, yes, we also have people who are data scientists, actuaries, economists, and a lot of people who help with the organizing and graphics and output.
Yeah, it's
website management. So yeah.
Yes, it's quite a vast. I've been there's a lot of information on there, and so the experts involved, this gives them a platform to also have a voice, because there is so much really strong censorship.
Yeah, very sadly, a lot of the scientists who are members are unable to put their names and faces on our website. And if they write something, it often has to go out under somebody else's name, because there's so much censorship and cancel culture at their universities.
Yeah, crazy.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's just one voice to be heard and a monopoly on the information. Yeah, and so there is a protocol called the Protocol for Reopening Society, among many other types of studies and papers. Can we talk about that issue?
Yes, well, I mean, it's been our view that society should never have been shut down. And we wrote that document assembling the references to all of the published science that is supportive of curtailing and ending these many mandates and restrictions that have been so unsuccessfully deployed all around the world, and also deployed in contravention of all previous pandemic respiratory virus guidelines and all indications from the past literature. So we have assembled that document together with a whole range of other policy advisories, such as the Declaration for the Protection of Children and Young People, whom we believe have been literally under attack and to no good end. Throughout this pandemic, it's been quite a disgrace, in our opinion, what has happened to the youth of the world, with 1.5 billion children having had their educations interrupted, for the most part, fatally so. There will be no recovery possible. And yeah, there's a huge volume, hundreds of webcasts, podcasts, articles.
Yeah, I agree. So it seems that the lockdowns, they not only create more problems, they do not help the situation. And it seems almost by design, if I may say, that they're not really meant to work because there are other agendas. There are other, would you agree with that? That there are other
Absolutely.
agendas behind?
This has been clear to us from the beginning, and you're quite right. You take your benchmark from the countries like Sweden and Finland, which didn't really have material restrictions. Finland just locked down for a little bit and then said this is a bad idea, and they stopped. And those countries have virtually zero excess mortality, whereas countries like Peru and South Africa that locked down hard and for a long time, and where everybody panicked and went bananas, have quite high excess mortality. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule, but overall, from a statistical point of view, lockdown increases deaths. It doesn't decrease them.
Yeah, I saw on the website on pandata.org, which I urge everyone to check out. I saw how it spiked. It's completely in a different field. Peru, especially.
That's mad, yeah. And you get, it's not only lockdowns that are bad measures. The mask wearing also shows no sign in the data, and there's a bunch of absolutely infantile academic papers that have very politically been pushed through peer review processes in journals that are essentially captured by big pharma. And the vaccine mandates as well. I mean, you've got countries like Vietnam, which were sailing along with no coronavirus deaths, and then they initiate these programs of vaccination, and all of a sudden they have a material surge in cases and deaths. So it's just this has really been lunatic territory for a year and a half, with all sound practices of public health being thrown out the window and replaced with these draconian and senseless measures that persist even after the data clearly shows that they don't work.
Yeah. And so to talk about children and the mask wearing, and also the PCR testing that's driving the numbers with the false positives, and the asymptomatic transmission for respiratory diseases. And yesterday in our conversation, you mentioned a really interesting fact or observation. It's like I have I don't want to go be too loose with the term fact, not being a scientist, but I think you could have more confidence stating your views. But you were mentioning something about the children actually being very beneficial,
yes.
Yeah, beneficial.
That's right, yes. And there was a very interesting study which showed that the more children there were in the household, the less likely the parents were to suffer severe disease. And the kind of head model I work on with that is, asymptomatic transmission happens, but it's completely unclear whether what is transmitted is disease or immunity.
Yeah.
Children are these little small creatures, and they run around and infect each other with all sorts of things, and that's fine, and they bring them home. And because they have robust innate immunity, and because they're tiny, they don't produce very high viral loads. So it's possible that the tiny little viral shedding that they get up to serves not to make people ill, but rather to give them a little dose that their immune systems can learn to recognize. So kind of like a live inoculation. And, we've always gotten through seasonal respiratory viruses by that mechanism. One of the things we changed this time around, which I think worsened the situation, was that we stopped the children from doing their thing.
Yeah.
Which is very, very sad.
Yeah, being happy and all the fear propaganda, which is also very harmful. Not only blocking everything in society and not permitting people to maintain their livelihoods, but also it's attacks. It's the first thing, I think, stress to attack the immune system.
For sure, and it's the fear, the economic hardship. It's one of the sources of great frustration for me is that lockdown has economically been hugely beneficial for wealthy people, for investors like me. We've all made a lot of money during the last 2 years. And it's the poor, the young, the lower classes or poorer people in the society there who have suffered the brunt of the consequences. And it's the older, wealthier people who have made out like bandits. And so I don't think there's ever been an event in history that has caused as much inequality as as the coronavirus policy response. It's not caused by the disease. It's not caused by the epidemic. It's caused by the policy response.
Yeah, okay. But some of the modus operandi seems parallel to other things that have occurred on a global scale in the past. I mean, when it comes to domination and control and the division of society, and there's so much of that going on, and on a moral level as well. And the peer pressure is outrageous. Even the censoring of opinion and
yeah, well, we've seen a lot of propaganda right from the beginning. You know, there were those falling man in China videos, and everybody knows that those were propaganda. They were false, because the rest of the world, we haven't seen that kind of scene. So, you know, wherever there is propaganda, there is a political agenda. Propaganda doesn't just emerge out of a vacuum. And, you know, that's been clear to us from the beginning, that this virus was in essence being marketed, as were the policy responses. And as time has gone by, we've launched freedom of information requests to establish what these very creepy behavioral science teams have been up to, that support governments, you know, various policy-making bodies. And what's revealed by those minutes and by leaks from those organizations is a very frightening thing, that they deliberately set out to spread fear amongst the population. For example, with masks, they knew that they were ineffective, but they thought that they performed a very useful function in representing a daily reminder of the presence of the so-called deadly virus.
Absolutely. It's a psychological warfare. Yeah.
Psychological warfare motivated by a political agenda, which we're only beginning to get to grips with, but we can see the roots of it in something totalitarian, something linked to the vaccine passports, social credit systems, that kind of thing. We're entering a very dystopian phase, and there's a strong attempt to implement a vision for our futures that we have not consented to, and that's happening all over the world.
Yeah, and I think more people are hopefully waking up to that crude I don't want to say reality, because I believe that there's still, you know, I'm also very optimistic that there's a lot that we can do. Alone, the fact that we're sitting across continents and being able to speak to each other in this way to hopefully spread some information. I always think who has the most to gain by lying and who has the most to lose by telling the truth, because many times when you have these whistleblowers and let's call them truth speakers, okay, the truth can be relative, but the people seem quite flabbergasted, and because they don't want to believe that there could be something so evil, and that governments would actually be behind these agendas, and that it could be so dark. A lot of people defend the government, saying, oh, they're doing the best they can, they just don't know any better.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that, because I think, you know, we didn't suddenly wake up on in February of 2020 and find that we had saints as elected leaders. Politicians have been politicians forever, and politicians like to accumulate power. So do corporate leaders.
Or they're compromised.
So there's nothing. Yeah, it's, you know, I always say to people, this unfortunately, this isn't a conspiracy. We face something much worse, which is the capture of government by corporate entities and private individuals and their foundations, and the rollout of plans that suit them but don't suit us. And we face now the product of decades of propagandized narratives and ideology distillation that has made possible this incredible mass psychosis and overreach by governments.
Yeah, well put. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to share as a closing statement? Or have we, yeah, is there anything that we can touch upon that's really important to give this pushback? I initially, yesterday when we had our talk, I tried to be as open-minded as possible and always look at both points of view and not to be too emotionally engaged or too biased with my own worldviews. But I think more and more I feel it, one can't just politely in cowardice, all opinions are welcome, of course, and there's always room for debate, but there's a time when also one can't continue to kind of cower in.
Yeah, people need to understand that their governments have been lying to them and manipulating them. And they also need to realize that one of the consequences of those lies and manipulations was that an incredible amount of fear has been created. And the antidote to fear is courage. People need to find their courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the character and virtue that allows you to master your fears. And so I always make the appeal to people to, both with respect to themselves and their friends and relatives, to help them conquer their fear, which will then enable them to regain their cognition, to snap out of the mass psychosis, and to begin to grapple with the cold hard facts, which contradict every element of the narrative that we've been fed.
Yeah. And the evidence is there when one looks, and the experts are there to speak their piece. They are there, and it's good to support them, and not have them just be alone. But I believe it's growing.
I think something that's not realized by most people is the extent of this corporate capture of which I speak. All around the world, wherever you look, institutes of public health and university medical faculties have been comprehensively captured by a handful of organizations, often at fairly low prices. And it makes no sense to listen to the representatives of those institutions when you are trying to understand what is going on, because they are speaking the agenda of the vaccine stakeholders.
Yeah. And that's paid for, and there's a monopoly on the information and everything. Yeah. I believe we've wrapped it up. Of course, I could talk to you for hours about everything, or just continue nodding because I agree with what you're saying. Thank you so much, Nick.
It's a real pleasure, Angie. Great project, and I'm delighted to be part of it. Good luck with it all.
I believe every little bit helps, and thank you so much for your time and everything that you're doing to create a difference for everyone and the benefit of everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you for the campaign. Alles auf dem Tisch. This was Angie Reed closing off. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.